Hey everyone, it's Alexis with Project Management Made Simple. In this video, I'm going to answer the question, what are the 5 process groups within project management? So let's get started. While every project may be unique in nature in that it is producing a unique service or a unique product, we do have process groups that go across any type of project that you'll come across. Whether that is a software project, you're building out an application, you're building out a house, or any other project, these 5 process groups can be applied to these projects and should be from a best practice standpoint to ensure that you're covering all your bases when you want to complete a project. So we'll use a scenario to walk us through each of these process groups. Let's say, for instance, we have a client that comes to us. Perhaps we are a professional services firm. We have programmers, developers, testers, any resource you would need for a software application to be built. You name it, we've got it. And in this case, we have a client that comes to us and gives us a budget. They give us a timeline that they want this done. They really call out the specific features that they want to have within the application. Now, before we jump right into getting started, before we jump into actually working on the project, there's a few steps that we want to take to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. And as we're moving forward in the process, project, we can execute beautifully. So it's great that our client knows their timeline, their target timeline, target schedule, target budget, target features that they want to undertake. Now, the other things that we want to consider before diving in is going to be asking the question, why does our client want to do this? What is their goal of this project? What are the outcomes that they're seeking to achieve? So let's say that this is a software application where it's something like an online shopping experience. So this is a potential in-person shop where they sell clothing, and now they want to build out an application because they want to allow for their users to be able to purchase items online. This is hopefully going to, result in more purchases and thus more money for the business. And so that is the main goal here. And so we are going to surround all of our decisions around that goal, that at the end of the day, we want to have an application that is easy for the users to use to be able to purchase more products. And in this case, it's going to be purchase more clothing, could be accessories, whatever is the case that this particular client is selling. So as we're talking about the why, we're entering into what's called the initiating process group. We're understanding what the justification is for the particular project. We're also analyzing our stakeholders. We're deciding, or we're determining rather, who is going to be affected by this project. In the case that we have, in the scenario that we have, we know that we have our client who is ultimately paying for our services to have the application built. You're going to have the end users, which in this case would be their customers who would be using the application. We have our project team. So there's quite a few stakeholders that we want to identify and we want to analyze to determine how they should be engaged with during the project. Now that we've initiated the project, we want to go into our planning process group. And this is where we are going to touch on various what's called knowledge areas. And I'll get into the knowledge areas in another separate video. But just for, just to keep going, in this video, when I speak of knowledge areas, I'm talking about things like scope, time, cost, quality, communication, stakeholders, procurement. All of those various knowledge areas are going to come into play when we're talking about the planning process group. And in this particular case, we are going to be thinking about what is a feasible schedule. Yes, we have a client who has told us they want to get this done within a certain time frame, but considering the scope that they have, is that actually feasible? And is it feasible within the budget that they want? How do we build in quality into this app so that ultimately when it is pushed to production and it is available to the end users, that there's not bugs everywhere, that it's working the way that we or the client wants it to work? How do we ensure that we have the appropriate resources to staff on this project and that they are available? Maybe, yes, we have the resources, but are they allocated to multiple projects? Does that affect our timeline? We also want to consider things like risks. What could potentially go wrong on the project? Also, what could go right? What are the things that we can probably enhance on our end to ensure that the project is successful, and also identifying issues maybe that coming into the project we have to be aware of and we have to deal with sooner than later so that they don't have a trickle down effect in the project. So really when we're planning, we're looking at all of these various areas and we're saying, what is it that needs to be done here so that the project can be successful? Next, we get into our executing process group. In this particular process group, this is where the work is being done. So we've done our initiation, we've done our planning. Now we have a plan that is set for the team to execute against, and they're going to go off, they're going to develop some features, they're going to test out those features. They're also going to do things like training the system administrators, also ensuring that there's user acceptance testing done. So pretty much anything that has to get done to produce, in this case, the app, is going to happen as a part of the executing process group. Next, we have our monitoring and controlling process group, and this is actually a process group, and I should mention this for all of the process groups, depending on if you're working in a waterfall fashion or you're working in an agile fashion. How these process groups are completed, how often they're completed, will change. Typically in a waterfall fashion, we will see that these process groups kind of go in terms of one after the other, sequential, versus when we're talking about in an agile world, these process groups overlap each other, and that will be something I discuss in another video. But I highlight this because when I talk about what's next, with the next process group, monitoring and controlling, this is something that explicitly goes across all of the process groups, especially the executing. So as a project manager, while my team is building out the particular software application, I am monitoring and controlling. So I'm ensuring So I'm going to be producing status reports that talk about the scope, like how in scope are we? Is there scope creep that's happening? Is there a lot of changes that are happening? When we talk about our quality, are there a lot of bugs that are coming up? Does this mean our team maybe needs some more training, or are they over allocated on other projects and that's why they're not doing their best job on this project? When we're talking about budget, is this over budget? Maybe it's potentially under budget, and it's the case that there's an opportunity to add some more features that the customer wants. When we're looking at our schedule, are we over schedule? Are we late on our schedule, or are we early on our schedule? If we're late on our schedule, what are the implications of that? Is there a reason that our client chose the particular target date? And that is something that we want to, going back to the process group, going back to the initiating process group, we want to understand why that target date is, so that when we do get into our monitoring and controlling and our executing, we can have a better understanding of what work it is that we need to prioritize to get done and hit that ultimate target date. So monitoring and controlling is really looking at, again, going back to those knowledge areas and looking at how we're performing in the knowledge areas, and if there's things that are off track, how to get us back on track. Finally, we have our closing process group, and this is the time where we've pushed the code into production. In the example that we have here, we've pushed the code into production, and so it's available for end users to be able to purchase goods and products on this particular application. We're going to do things like document lessons learned, also known as retrospectives in the Agile world, where we can assess how well the project went, things that maybe didn't go so well, and kind of in any actions that we can take moving forward. Now, again, this is something else that I'll highlight in terms of Agile versus Waterfall. Typically, from my experience, what I've seen in Waterfall projects is we tend to do lessons learned a lot less frequently than we would in Agile world. We pretty much will do it kind of at the end of a phase within the project, versus when we're talking about in the Agile world and we're talking about sprints, we're doing our retrospectives of our lessons learned. We're doing them more often. And again, that will be something I get into more detail in another video. But just to provide context for those of you all who are thinking ahead in terms of how these process groups apply on a waterfall project versus an Agile. This is one of the things I'll highlight that is different within the various project methodologies. This was a video detailing the 5 process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and finally closing. I will have a video dedicated to each process group where I go into more detail around the activities and the deliverables that are created as a result of each of the process groups. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a like. Also, leave any questions that you may have below, and I will talk to you all in the next video.